Hey everyone, it's Joe from Materials Woodshop. In this video, I'll show you how I made these end grain cutting boards step by step. First, we need to figure out what design we want to make so we can select which hardwood to use. I tend to use the common hardwoods such as walnut, cherry, and maple. Though from time to time, I'll use padauk, zebra wood, or purple heart depending on availability. On this board, I will be using walnut, cherry, and maple that my buddy Sean from Forrest Sawmill sent me. If you're looking for lumber to use on your next cutting board or small furniture build, check out the DIY kits that's available on Sean's website. I'll drop a link below if you're interested. Since I mostly use rough cut lumber, I have to mill my boards before I can start. First, I'll trim the stock to length using my miter saw or jigsaw. Then I'll use the joiner to joint one face and one edge. And finally, use the planer to plane the non-jointed face. If you don't have a joiner or a planer, you can buy pre-surfaced lumber. S4S lumber, which means surface on all sides, is pretty much ready to go, but will cost you just a little bit more than rough lumber. After joining the face and the edge, I'm going to mark it with a squiggly line. Then I'm going to use my square to make sure I have a perfect 90 throughout the length of the stock. Next up, I'm going to use the planer to get to the desired thickness. Before I start, I'd like to discuss a few terms I'll be using so it's easier to follow along. Face grain boards comes from plain sawn lumber that's glued together or from one solid piece. On these two boards, I marked the grain orientation, and these two are example of plain sawn lumber. Edge grain boards comes from either quarter or rift sawn lumber that's glued together or from one solid piece. Plain sawn lumber can be turned into edge grain boards by ripping them and turning them sideways. Now that we've covered the basics, let's get back to milling. Since the walnut and the cherry was looking pretty plain, I went ahead and went through my scrap pile and grabbed some maple and zebra wood so I can add more contrast and make the boards a little bit more interesting. Before ripping the bigger pieces on a table saw, I went ahead and drew a triangle on both the walnut and the cherry ones so that I can book match them when it's time to lay out the grain pattern. So here's the reason I draw these triangles on my plain sawn lumber before ripping them and turning them to edge grain boards. I can turn my plain sawn lumber into book match pieces, and then I can figure out what best grain direction I can design for the board. So I'll be turning this one like that. These two I'll be pairing up, turning them like that, and these two like that. From here, I'll take a minute and look at the orientation or the grain direction and match it as best as I can so it looks pleasing to the eye with the other pieces that I have. So I grabbed this extra piece of maple. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring these two in first, put the maple in the middle, these two next, as the grain almost run the same way as the first two pieces, and these two at the end to kind of cap it off. Now this is gonna be my final design or grain pattern, so I'm gonna go ahead and mark this before I pull out the clamps and glue all the boards up. Again, this way, when I'm in the clamps and I'm hurrying to glue everything up, I'm not gonna get confused as to which boards goes where. So all I have to do is match the lines and glue everything up. Here's the other two designs I came up with for the rest of the lumber. This one has cherry, walnut, and maple, and this one has walnut, maple, and zebra wood. I went ahead and used some scrap maple and cut them into thin pieces to really accentuate and make the walnut pop and this zebra wood pop, and I think it's gonna look great after we put some finish on it. In preparation for glue up, I added tape on my clamps. This will make cleanup a lot easier later on. Also, I'm gonna go ahead and line up my boards and dry fit them to make sure the joints are nice and tight before committing to the glue up. I'm gonna line up the triangle that I drew earlier. Then actually I'm gonna use my pipe clamp and tighten this one first. Put a nice downward pressure in the board to keep them nice and flat. Just snug it up a little bit. Don't tighten it all the way. Then working on this one, same thing, snug it up a little bit. And to our last clamp. Once everything is snug, go ahead and tighten it all the way. Inspect your joints. Make sure that it looks seamless. For the glue, I'll be using Titebond 3 as it is waterproof. And I have boards that we have in our kitchen that are 5 years old that we still use daily. Now that all the boards are cleaned up, I'm going to use the crosscut sled on my table saw to trim them to their final dimensions. Now it's time for my favorite part, sanding. I'm gonna start with 120 grit, then 150. After that, I'm gonna pause because I need to route the edges, add juice grooves or handle grooves if you want to, and even engraving. This would be the ideal time to do all that because after that, I'm gonna water pop the grains, then finish at 220 grit. Really? Sanding, your favorite part? Now that I've chamfered all the edges, I'm going to add grab handles on these boards using this big chamfer bit. Usually if the boards are over 1.5 inches, I do a different type of grab handles, which I'll show a picture here on the screen. But since these boards are less than 1.5 inches, I didn't want to run into destroying the edges of this. Time to water pop the boards and get a sneak preview of the final product. Water popping or raising the grain is a very crucial part to achieve a smooth surface. The water raises the wood fibers that will be sanded down during your final sanding. This ensures your board will stay smooth after being washed. For the next step, I'm going to be drilling the holes for our board feet. So I have this jig right here, which I put on the corner of each board, and then I use a scribe. And depending on which hole I use, I will mark that for each of the corners. After that, I'm going to use an undersized bit. And as you can see here, I put a little blue tape flag on the bit so I don't drill through my boards. Quick and easy way to make sure you don't mess up. Now for my favorite part, my actual favorite part, and that's applying food grade mineral oil on the boards. We will see how beautiful the boards are going to look like after applying the finish. I'm going to let it sit for a few minutes, and then I'm going to top it off with this board wax. I'm going to leave an Amazon affiliate link down below for all the products I use in this build. Thank you for all your support. All right, Isabella, what do you think of my cutting boards? All right, let's do it again. All right, Isabella. All right, Isabella, what do you think of my cutting boards?
They're awesome.
Yeah? How would you rate it? 10 out of 10 or what?
100 out of 10.
All right.